Well, welcome back to BarstoolBuddhas. I'm Jai. This is still not Rip.
Paul.
This is Paul, and we're going to do a second interview with Paul. We did music before,
Yeah, that was fun.
and we talked about where Paul's at with music, where we both were through the years, just touched on some different things. And what we thought we'd do is we'd widen that out today. And what we would do is we'd talk about things like the French Revolution, World War I, Blade Runner, cultural, how our arts and music reflect the state of the culture. And so if you watch television right now, or you go to YouTube or you go to Netflix, you can get pretty depressed because there's a lot of reflecting of a lot of culture that, at least for me, is not my favorite personal favorite of what's going on in the world or what I'd like to see. But it is reflective. We talked about that last time about the punk music was reflective of the change that was wanted to get rid of disco. And then behind that was Kiss down the line. And before that was everything that came in the 60s. So things have been moving and there's these crunch points, right? And you know, what's normal isn't normal anymore. And we talked about that a little bit about the COVID, right?
Yeah.
When's normal coming back? Well, that normal is never coming back.
Oh, it's like inflation. So people think when you stop inflation that the prices are going to go back to normal. They're not. All it means is the rapid rate of the prices increasing has slowed down. Prices are still going to go up, but just not at the extreme rate. Everything's not going to jump $1 in price again in the next 6 months. That happened last 6 months, but it's still $1 more. We're not going back to where it cost $1 less.
It's a false victory, even if it stops.
Yeah.
You never get the power back and you never get the money back.
And
Isn't that right?
You never recover politically completely from inflation.
So, we were talking a little bit about how things are a little crazy. There's some wars going on. There's people in the streets. It seems like, looking back now, it's from 70, there's always been people in the streets about something. But this seems a little more intense than it actually has been in the years. And so I ask you if you're going to go see the new Napoleon movie, because you're a student of history. So we started talking about this. So, fill us a little bit about what was going on then. And then we talked about moving up, 100 years and how that relates to then, and try to relate to what's happening now.
Well, the interesting thing is if you do comparison, what was going on here, for example, just minor things, but what was going on in the United States when Napoleonic Wars were going on? Knoxville got its charter during that time to be a city.
Yeah.
That's how long ago it was. It was still 200 years before they got electricity here. 80 years since everybody else got it. And so the Napoleonic Wars are just a despicable black mark on history. You talk about anti-Semitism, going after gypsies, going after just pure domination. I hope in the new movie they don't portray this guy as a normal human being. I really don't. A man who's sad because his wife doesn't love him anymore, or any of that heart-wrenching bullcrap, because on the ledger of bad deeds, the ways not to behave, is far stacked against him compared to for him. Even his legal code, which is used by France and even elements of it used in places in the United States and in a few places in Canada, it's antiquated. It causes a number of problems that seem systematically caused by the design of the structure of the legal code.
But that's what all of them will do. They all have their high points or low points. If they don't move, they trap people in a system that doesn't work anymore, correct?
Right. So if you don't,
and that leads to what?
Stagnation and cultural misunderstandings, and
cultural decay,
and
marginalization. People disaffected by the world, lose positive look at the world.
Right. So the further away you get away from an event, the more likely you are to repeat the causes that it caused. It's like World War II. We're 80 years out. That's about the same time we had World War I. It had been about 80, 90, 100 years since they had had any continental war. And so war fever and this idea that it's not as bad as it is. You have these boys signing up to get uniforms so they can get the girl and get the glory, and then they end up wallowing in a muddy pit for 3 years, catching diseases and dying of everything but the bullet a lot of times. Then they go home with one eye, one leg, and they're cast outs on society. We still deal with that. We don't have that reference of people who our fathers, grandfathers, who know the perils of war and won that war like they did with World War II. Vietnam just chewed up people's, not just their lives, but their mental facilities, their ability to really readjust into society. The Desert Storm has lost more people, or at least a similar number of people, to suicide over what they were asked to do as they did in combat deaths. And so you have these people who don't want to belie their oath and their service, but at the same time don't necessarily talk about their experiences with anybody except that person who's going to join the military. My grandfather would have never told me about his experiences in World War II at 10 years old. The only person he probably would have told is somebody that was going into the military themselves. And that was that generation. But now, the Desert Storm veterans and stuff like that, it's a shame the things they're forced to live with. The war's still on.
Yeah. And it has that everlasting effect. I remember it wasn't about the war, but, between the world wars, the collapse of the economy in 1929, and it changed the economic landscape, the political landscape forever. It's just a big line in the United States and the world, actually, because it went worldwide. And you have people, to bring it home, my grandfather, my great-grandmother, and those folks lived in the middle of nowhere on a dirt piece of farm, and they had to paint for other people, or they had to raise their own potatoes and stuff. And I grew up with the ethic is, you get up in the morning, you're productive, go find make a living, don't waste food, don't waste anything, you can't waste anything. And that mentality lasted for years and years and years. And then the great boom came in the 50s and the 60s, and it looked like we were going to have fortune and 2 cars in the garage and all this stuff forever and ever and ever. Well, we can see that that's kind of dwindling too because of resources and the population growth. But that was the ethos that I was exposed to. Like, this is the way you live your life. You don't waste. If you want it, you got to go out and try for it. And that's not what we see in society right now. There's some people still clinging to that, but there's some people who realize that they may never have what they saw the generation before last having. And it's a problem. And you go, well, politics is the same way. You can't go back and recreate that. And I think some people are hoping to have what mommy and daddy had based on a system that no longer works the way it did.
Right. For example, my grandfather, my mom's dad, he was a truck driver, made a decent lower to middle class living. Truck drivers do not make that now.
No.
They're forced to do their own maintenance on their own trucks. They're forced to do that. You're basically captured by your bosses into being somewhat of a your own, subcontractor and liable for all this stuff. Where
that's how things have changed.
You have to do to make a profit, you're not going to be able to support a family, and you're going to be gone all the time.
I know a guy who was an owner-operator, and for the company he was working with. And I'm not in the business, so I don't know what's fair, what's not fair. But he got like 50% of what he did. Now, he had to put all the fuel in the truck. He had to pay all the people doing. He had to pay insurance. He had to pay damages. Anything that happened came out of his 50%. All the other group was doing was hooking him up with loads. Mm-hmm. They got 50% of his labor for that. Now,
for leads.
If you're in business and you're running a small convenience store or something, you'll be lucky to hear to make 10, 15% if you're really rocking it. A individual plumbing contractor, he might make 20% a year, maybe. Hospitals, 3 to 4% is profit margin on most for-profit hospitals. There's just not a lot of profit. So when you talk about a truck driver, so this guy, he switched. Now he gets 73% or something with this other company, which sounds a lot fairer. And they have some fees and this and that. But he's doing all the work. All they do is book his loads. And he's still paying 25% for that privilege. But he's got actually 50% more in his pocket than he had before.
Right. And 25% pays for itself.
Exactly. That's where his livelihood comes from, his profit to live. But you see a lot of that's not available now. So, we got off track a little bit, but it all folds back. You're living in a society where you have certain expectations, and there's certain realities that are based in error with what you thought it was going to be, or what it could be, or what it used to be. And people are very, very good at looking back and seeing, well, I want that, but they're sold out. What can I get now? Instead of, what are we going to do going forward? Where's the gold mine forward, or where's the life we want forward? Where's the culture we want forward? And what I see, of course, I've got a narrow view of things, I'm sure, as I see a lot of people are so tired of that, they're starting to tear down the systems that have created what they see as the problem. And that's generally what a revolution does. The French Revolution started that way. This is so rotten, we got to carve it out. Europe fell apart, we got to change everything. Hitler came along, we can't do this, we got to change it again. The problem is, usually a surgeon's knife should be the last remedy for your healing, because it takes out the good with the bad to try to preserve the whole. And if you're not fully informed, no matter what area that is, you may not get the results you expected. You may lose, like they used to say, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. So when you get these situations like this insane French Revolution, which does not compare to the American Revolution in any way that I can think of, you create this horrible situation where an authoritarian psycho warlord is able to crown himself emperor. Then, over speculation and selling junk stocks to all the population, no matter how fast you can, in 1929, causes the stock market to crash, which allows a psycho failed artist and author who has a bent against the entire world to use that and his group of street thugs to become the most insane dictator in the world. Now, for every billionaire you have, you create 10,000 homeless people for every new billionaire.
Really?
Because there are opportunities now in that man's pocket.
I see. So
every new business has to be designed to cut labor. Every new product cuts labor for somebody. Then you got a lot of people who are in nowhere, jobs going nowhere.
Well, just an aside, I have a pet peeve about this self-checkout thing. I understand why they're doing it. I understand it's a dream for inventory control if you really do it right. It cuts out people handling it, human beings making mistakes, all that kind of happy stuff. I understand all of it. But I walk up in the Walmart, and this lady's there. She's smiling. I said, "It's a shame." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "That you're actively working to do away with your job. Mm-hmm. You're standing here smiling over the machine that's going to take your livelihood." Mm-hmm. And I see this everywhere, and I see that kind of mentality. Let's do this, whatever this is, and it's going to take this away. Okay, what's going to fill the void? It's like, Nietzsche, the death of God, was never about God actually being there or God being dead or whatever. It's like, here's a structure. Yeah. Here's a world order that we've gone to loosely that's determined by this, and this, and it's going away, and it did go away. And he was absolutely right. What's going to take its place? And the struggle to find that, fill that void is creating, even to this day, 200 years later, almost 200 years later, 170 years, the mess that he predicted. So, I mean, you've got people struggling with it. I think society is going through some kind of massive change.
I think it's not such a bad thing, but I think of two things that really are major instigators of change that are great things, but are also very dangerous. Look at so suddenly you invent the printing press. About 100 years goes by. You start printing newspapers. Well, there's no check on what you're printing is actually true. Or whether it's opinion, you can't tell truth from opinion.
You got to have content,
so you
right?
Had this real big problem with yellow journalism leading up to World War I. They were printing stuff like German soldiers are cannibals. They love to eat babies. They set people on fire for fun. When then the soldiers came back and said, these newspapers you've been reading are crap. None of that. These are just boys like us over there. They don't eat babies. And it's like that. And people stopped buying newspapers. And then the New York Times decided we're going to put our code of ethics of truth right on the front page for a while to make people help.
All the news is fit to print.
Right. And that's the most corrupt time ever. Between 19 and 1920, there's cheating in baseball. It almost ruined baseball. Taking bets with the Chicago White Sox and all that stuff. Like that interperiod, great things happened, but a lot of times it was a rapid dismantling of culture for the better and the worse. Newspapers had to be a little bit more responsible. Now, fast forward to the internet. Suddenly, every human being on the planet can write an op-ed every 5 minutes and it be accepted by that newspaper. It's a difference in culture change. You know, newspapers caused wars, intentionally fabricated wars. The Spanish-American War was the biggest bunch of crap ever. Remember the Maine? Remember the Maine was full of ammunition parts, just like they said it was? Remember when the Germans sent a letter to the United States, printed it in American newspapers, saying, we know there's munitions on these things, and if you come anywhere near us, we will blow them out of the water. And they sent them anyway, and then said there was nothing on there, and it definitely there was. They said they killed the people on the Maine, and they had no justification. And people believed it, and they created a slogan, remember the Maine. They went off farting to war. And the Hearst's family, the newspaper magnates, they sold more newspapers than they had ever thought they would be able to sell.
You remember that movie that came out a few years ago where Willie Nelson was in it, and they were fabricating a war?
That's a great Wag the Dog.
Wag the Dog had that song, Good Old Shoe, and all that. Okay. I mean, that reminded me of the whole Maine story, because it is the Maine story. It's the same thing. And, but do you think, society and culture has these waves, these peaks and valleys, so it reinvents itself. Do you really think that the old culture has to be completely destroyed? There's groups out there now that say we need to destroy everything this country is about and build it back from square one. I think that's sort of a limited view, but do you really think that's a practical thing?
I do.
Why?
Because our Constitution, for one, and other documents that have founded our government were based on the unique idea that the Magna Carta is not set in stone, that it's malleable, it will change over time. If it stops changing, it will become dogma, it will become text, it will become sanctified, placed in stone, and worshipped.
The new 10 Commandments.
Right. And it's not supposed to be that. They already created a civil government, a civil religion, if you will, by basing everything on Rome and this kind of idea that America was this place where you go to change your name. You go to reinvent yourself. And so Europeans all about this family lineage and heritage and all this severely defined classes amongst people. And it's hard to go from one to the other. We have a lot of guys who started off shoe shining as immigrants who ended up running giant corporations coming out of that immigrant of 1880s. And the reality was you could come here and reinvent yourself. And so we don't want you thinking about who your fifth great-grandfather was. Your fifth great-grandfather was George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and these founding fathers. The name itself gives you a religious connotation. You sit down with an indigenous tribe, and they can tell you verbally their ancestors going back 300 years. And then they just get tired of talking about it. They know the rest of them, but there's just not enough time. Now, you don't know your own great-great-grandfather's name, most people. You know who Benjamin fucking Franklin is, though.
Well, that's true. And I get that, but here's the thing. There are certain things that are in those documents that some people, as long as they're drawing breath in this country, are never going to let go of. Freedom of speech, those kind of things. They don't want that changed. Now, you may add things to the Constitution. You may change things to accommodate groups of people, situations. I get that, and there's a process for that. But the politicians have made it damn near impossible to get a consensus to do those things. So I'm not sure that it's the documents themselves that are causing the problems.
No, it's a culture where you sanctify these things and place them in stone instead of making the necessary change that fits to the modern situation. You know, when they wrote the Constitution, it was before, I also often said, before the real Industrial Revolution and the invention of the corporation and the fascination that the Constitution started with contracts. It was the first contract, really, in so many ways. And so now you can't change the contract due to certain modern situations. It becomes a problem. So you got these antiquated ideas. It's the same thing with religion a lot of times, where you get this text based on the culture of thousands of years ago and wonder why it doesn't really apply so well now. It's because it's kind of designed that way. Religion itself is the antithesis of democracy in so many ways, because one is inclusive by nature, which is democracy, and one is exclusive by dogma. So they like to think everybody's welcome in our church, but they will ask you to leave.
Yeah.
If you don't follow their rule, they will ask you to leave. They'll always want you to vote. And there are things you can't do according to the Constitution. Most of it's criminal behavior, violence, and things like that. But mostly, society determines language. I can't go around saying the same things I said when I was a kid, because culture's changed. I don't regret that. But I never realized that calling somebody a spastic was a pretty bad thing to do. If I have any kind of compassion, I can't just refer to this guy in my class with physical problems as a spastic. It's dirty. It's not fair. And so culture has lead its way, so we don't really call people with Parkinson's spastics anymore.
Well, that would seem like common sense, but actually it's probably not. But, I see that it's kind of the same way you do. I see modern governments and modern religion, and modern religion doesn't mean a modern religion, but the state of religion in a modern world as being people clinging to very old ideas.
Yeah.
Some of them are good ideas, but they're so inextricably linked. I don't know how they ever sort it. So you take a person like Sam Harris and all the guys, Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. They say, we don't need these religions anymore. They're antiquated. They are dangerous for mankind. They are preventing us from moving forward as a species.
Right.
And we're busy killing each other over ideas that may not even be pertinent anymore.
And if you're speaking, I like Christopher Hitchens, because if you're speaking to me from the point of view of your religion, I almost have no response, because it's not my religion. Stop putting me into your belief system. I do not believe in the afterlife, so stop asking me how what I just said is going to affect me then. It doesn't exist in my world.
Yeah, we used to have when I first moved down here, we lived in the back beyond in the country, and everybody was fundamentalist Christians. And there was two or three things they'd always ask you. The first thing they'd ask you was, have you been born again? Is Jesus your Savior? What church do you go to? Will you come to our church? But it's what they had. It was their life. They were offering you what they thought was the best.
Yes.
So you couldn't really begrudge them, because they were trying to give you the very best things. I have a story about my grandmother. She drove me crazy. Now that I'm older, I realize what she was trying to do, and I do appreciate some of the things she tried to do. But the way she did it was from the viewpoint of a really staunch Southern Baptist, and she would just give me grief about everything. But what she was trying to do for me, the three things she did, she says, eat all your food, and it was good food. Okay, take a hot bath and get a good night's sleep. The three most boring things on the planet for a 7-year-old, right?
Right.
But you don't have the consciousness at 7 to do that. And I think in some ways, there's large segments of our culture that haven't progressed to the maturity of maybe a 70-year viewpoint looking back and knowing that that's a good thing. They're just against. They don't have a better plan. They're just against. They feel it's got to change. It's killing me. and they're going to destroy or try to destroy that which is offending them without having a better way or a methodology that's actually working.
Here's the key, I think, better way. Okay, so I can rail against the moon and protest against the moon, but I have no solution for what I consider to be wrong there. I'm just against it. So I'm not really for anything. I'm just against something. And I see there's a lot of that surface stuff and a lot of bandwagon nearing. And I knew when Russia went to war with Ukraine and everybody rushed out and got their blue color and support, that it was very good. But I knew that a certain percentage of these people are just bandwagoneers. They don't understand it. It's the popular thing to say and do right now. If they looked deeper into the situation, that's why I don't wear sports jerseys. That's why I don't wear flags. I don't identify myself with branding very much. It's because it's a blinder.
Exactly. And you let other people speak for you. And then sometimes they speak in nuanced ways that if you really dug deep, you'd realize, like the guy said, these are not my people. This is not my tribe. Why am I waving? It's like, and I don't want to get too controversial, but this brings up a good point. I saw the other day in the pro-Palestinian demonstrations, there's the LGBT people coming in. They have no idea that the people they're protesting with would throw them off of buildings.
Right.
And I mean, it's like, that's some blindness there. And I see that type of tunnel vision happening in a lot of our cultural situations where I'm going to join this group to get a little more power. And together we're going to do this. And they don't understand, the first thing Adolf Hitler did when he formed his government and had the Nazis, he got the SS to take out the brown shirts, which put him in power. The Bolsheviks did the same thing. They took out millions of Russians that helped them do the revolution because those are people that just affected a revolution, and you can't have them. So You've got to understand who you're hopping up and down with and who you're – but I see a lot in this culture, people just – they want some release. They want to be heard. They want to get in the street and make themselves and their opinions felt. So they kind of just go with what's happening. And like you said, a lot of them don't really understand the people they're rooting for. They may be rooting for the cause that they don't like Israel or they want this to stop, the war to stop. Okay, that's part of all that. But when you're aligning yourself with people who will do that historically to you and your kind, when that battle gets over and you're over there, they're coming for you. You need to be aware of the cost of quietly following something because it seems to be popular.
Yeah, I agree. That whole situation over there, I think, is exasperated by baby Netanyahu's existence. If he's a religious man, I'm Mickey Mouse. There's no way he's religious. The way he means what he says, he is brutal. And the Hamas guys, they're just as big a cowards as he is.
Well, there are a bunch of thugs beating each other up, and innocent people, as usual, getting killed.
None of it has to do with Judaism. Not one bit. He's an authoritarian, brutal, hard line against those he's deemed to be his enemies. This guy's wanted to destroy Iran, not make change.
Well, they want to do the same to him.
Political violence. Yes, on both sides. Political violence is a form of communication, but it's
an expensive one.
Yeah, and
well, I didn't mean to drag down a political thing, but you see it in the culture, and you see it's affecting people. And if you're I can't say normal. I don't know what a normal human being is. If you're the average Joe, you want to feed your family, you want a house, you want some peace. It's like the Dalai Lama, and he's one of the few religious leaders that I listen to because he comes out with things that are practical. He says, all beings want a happy life.
Yeah.
Show me somebody I'll show you a psychopath that doesn't want to have a happy life. But most people want to live their life, have a home, have enough to eat. And so I think people want that. And when they see things going on, they want to get to some stasis, some place where that can happen. And so they come up with, I'm going to protest this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to help them get this done because it'll clear out and then I'll have what I want. At the root of that is what's in it for me is a human trait. It's a human need. What's in it for me? So if I'm doing this and I'm doing this, we'll make this a better place. We can go back to the Walmart and go to the Blue Light Special or whatever it is. Let me have my life, because all beings want a happy life. They don't want all this garbage going on.
Right.
And those are the very people who have to fight these wars. They're the ones that get dragged in and a gun put in their hands. They're the ones that can't pay their grocery bills because the war budget is sucking all the life out of the economy. Not to get too left-wing there. That's almost left-wing for me. But, but it's a fact. It disturbs the economies of the average person, because all this money from the war, the money's coming out of your pocket and it's going into other pockets.
Yeah.
And the explosions and the gunfire, that's just how they sell the profit. That's about as Marxist as I can get right there. But I mean, it is happening, and it has that, and people get upset by that. And what happens, to the extent that it's happening now, with 8 billion people on the planet, wars breaking out everywhere, threats of wars everywhere, people are scared. And when people are scared, they want something to rally them to a safe place. And
it's just the same thing that happened after 9/11, for example. The level of being able to just lump 1 billion people in under one umbrella. And some of these people are just taxi cab drivers trying to get their next meal and feed their families, as if they're some major, have some deep, devout religion, that's any more based on anything than other family cohesion than anything else. And that's the thing about, like you were talking about your grandmother. It was the Benjamin Franklin wisdom, only that's more secular. Early to bed, early to rise keeps a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. It's those same things you got to kind of drill into a child, whether it's through religion or cultural heroes or bits of wisdom that you pick up from your life. But when you're pitting major religions against each other for political gain, when terrorists are killing just a bunch of teenagers in a field, listen to music, those are non-combatants. How many combatants are being killed versus how many just workaday people? It's the workaday people who are getting slaughtered on both sides. And you can blame them, well, they voted for these people. Well, shit. Is that enough to kill me because I voted for somebody? I let these people with guns move into my neighborhood? Oh, what was I supposed to do? Am I going to talk shit about them when their guns are right over there? Really, am I?
No.
Do I want to keep my taxi cab job?
Mm-hmm. Well, the average person does have some power. It's not like you have to go to the street. You can refuse to participate in that craziness as much as you can. It's actually harder not to, I think, at some point.
Yeah, and that's where you end up with safety in numbers.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 of us in the street. You're going to kill us all? You're going to fire us all?
No. And I have no problem with demonstrations. I do have problems with riots because they tend to be partial to one kind of riot over another.
Political violence on all different forms. Congressmen threatening to fight each other, and then man ring to prove right about their point. It's political violence. It's nonsense. It's childish. It's easy. It's too easy to bomb somebody. It's too easy.
It must be easier because if it wasn't, they'd be doing it the other way, right?
Right.
Well, we got a little bit into politics, but I mean, we're talking about culture because we live in a culture, and like I said, I was raised in that culture where whether I could get there or not, whether you and I could get to the same level, it was always up to question. And there's all kind of social concepts around that. But it has to belong with self-respect and self-reliance to some. You got to put one foot in front of the other, no matter how hard it is, right. Or you're just a zero, or you're marked off the ledger, or that you die, or whatever. Nobody knew where you were here. You didn't make any money, whatever. You know, say the other side of not doing that is way more significant in terms of any kind of positive outcome than trying to be self-reliant, trying to have self-respect, trying to be part of the community. And there was a time, at least in clusters in the United States, certain groups didn't get it and some people did. But that was a prevalent ideal anyway, and it worked for a while.
Well, the FDR did a lot of wonders for constantly reminding people of the importance of democracy and how easy it could slip away, and what the real dangers of fascist and authoritarian rhetoric is. He talked about it all the time, and people walked away with this idea which dissipated a few years ago, that, well, I'm a Yankee and you're a redneck and we don't agree. We can still drink beer together. We can still like the same band at the same concert. We can still like the same comedians.
Yep.
But now you got people saying, well, this culture is going to lead to a revolution. And you're like, wow, there's absolutely no practical thinking of historical thing other than the ignorance that precedes global war. That's just the ignorance that precedes it every time.
Well, ignorance is one of the most dangerous concepts in mass you can get. And so we're running it a little long. We have to wrap it up. But to tie it together, we were talking about the Lord of the Rings. Yeah. One of the lessons I got out of the Lord of the Rings in terms of culture was eons back, their forefathers in this subdued evil. They thought they subdued evil and had it under control, and they all went back to sleep. And then one fine morning, there's Mount Doom. There's this evil coming at them, and they went, "Oh shit, what do we do? Oh, we'll send this midget with a ring to take care of it."
Well, then it goes back to this sort of religious concept of the meek and the little man, the honest man, will be in the end the one you have to count on.
I don't know.
Simple folk, with the Jed Clampett wisdom, are the ones you really can trust. So I don't know if I believe it.
Well, I used to get in an argument with my grandmother again. She would say, "The meek will inherit the earth. You don't have to be a bully. You don't have to be mean." I had a temper, you know me. And I would say, the meek will inherit the world because the rest of everybody be dead.
Yeah, that's about right.
That's the only way they're going to inherit it if there's nobody else, because anybody else is going to take it from them. But I don't mean to, we diverge. But the point is, modern culture is tricky. And I guess every generation thought, well, it's right on the edge. But I see it in my span of 70 years. I see it kind of more on edge now than I've seen it in many areas. Used to, there was a war here, there was this here, you'd focus here, you'd go here. Now it's like everywhere. Pick your disaster. Pick your complaint, right? So it's a tricky time to be alive.
That's for sure.
So I think what we should do is we should keep our ear to the ground, be good people, and play more music.
Absolutely.
You think that'll work?
Absolutely.
So you got to get this album out. Yeah. I've told you several of those songs on there. There's one of those songs I play in my car at least twice a week.
I appreciate that.
I love that song. I think it'd be a big hit, I mean, so you need to keep it going.
Yeah, we're working on. We were working on it last.
People
night.
need relief, and many times it's from music.
Well, I figure with 100 songs, we start with 10 or 12, and then see what we've got left. Maybe make a second effort.
You could take the 100 and mix them, and you could use them all. Yeah. Well, I guess that's going to do for now. Let us know in the comments if you like this.
Shout out to Steve who kept your stool warm.
Paul's kind of cheap at this moment. Doesn't cost a lot to get him here. So when he's rich and famous, we may have to book him in here. So enjoy it while you can. So we'll be back soon enough, probably sooner than some of you want, but we'll see you then.
Bye.